Welcome back. We got a good friend of the channel, Professor Dave Collum, professor at Cornell University. Professor Dave, welcome back to the channel. How you doing, my friend?
I am good, and you, as I was telling you about before, about 10 minutes ago, I think I broke my toe. So I'm sitting
Yeah,
there gritting my teeth a little bit, but besides that, I'm
Professor
doing
Dave's
okay.
got a broke toe, y'all. So, just kind of bear with us. But Professor Dave,
I'll play injured.
I I was I'm reading the news as I do daily, trying to stay informed, and I ran across a headline, and you were the first person to pop in my head when I ran across this headline. This just broke yesterday, I believe. Pentagon says Ukraine accounting error revealed last month is much bigger than previously stated. The Pentagon announced Tuesday that an accounting error revealed last month was significantly more than previously stated and provided to Ukraine the aid provided to Ukraine was overvalued by 6.2 billion rather than 3 billion. So essentially a $3 billion accounting error. Professor Dave, don't you hate when that happens?
Yeah, I know. When I lose track of a billion in my bank account, I get upset. I think that's all baloney. I think they're just going to give Ukraine more money. I think they're just making to give them money. So.
Yeah, at this point, and then we're hearing about the vowed Ukraine spring counteroffensive. I haven't been able to find out too much details on what exactly is happening with that counteroffensive. Do you have any information on that?
Well, I do. I occasionally cruise over to YouTube to pick up updates from the guys who tell the other side of the story. So guys like McGregor and stuff. My understanding is Ukraine has pretty much been ground to dust, and so the counteroffensive is malarkey. The only way the counteroffensive gets real is if we turn it into World War III and bring in NATO troops in earnest. And so um, I read something this morning that said that by a guy named Will Schreiber, who does really nice analyses of geopolitics um, under the name Imatronic or something, he says that Russia has laid out on the table their demands for peace at this point, and they basically are going to try to unwind about 15 years of NATO's progress.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
is there any progress with that? I think I did see some reports of that. So what is the West's standpoint on that? Are they at the point where they're maybe I know they're not going to ever admit defeat, but are they going to kind of wave the white flag? Is that at what point can this not go on anymore?
Well, how long can we not accept Hunter Biden's laptop, right? So I think I've had the suspicion for probably the entire 2023 year. So as you recall, I wrote about Ukraine in 2022. And when I wrote about it, it was an unpopular stance. And now I would have to say that I'm not fearing for my life walking the street anymore, because I basically took Putin's side and said, not that I'm sympathizing with Putin, but rather that Putin was forced to play the hand he played. He played it. He actually played it intentionally to not do damage to Ukraine and to not take civilian casualties and to actually not have a big war. And NATO just kept amping it up. His Putin's big mistake was he thought NATO, as soon as they got sort of a punched in the nose, would say, "Okay, we're done," and they didn't do that. And so Putin, I think it was the blowing up of the bridge and the blowing
Nord
up of the
Stream pipeline.
pipeline. Yeah, I think those two events convinced Putin, okay, now we got to take the gloves off. And so now he's kicking the crap out of Ukraine pretty hard, very tactically. So he doesn't care about real estate. He cares about taking out. He's very tactical about taking out military advantage.
Mhm.
And so, you hear about we're sending 31, Abrams tanks to Ukraine. It'll take them 5 minutes to take those 31 tanks out. That's just a stupid thing. That's just
There was clips of Biden saying like, "Hey, don't worry, we're not sending tanks, we're not sending F-16s. If we did that, that would be World War III." Fast
right.
forward to now, we are sending heavy artillery.
Or we say
Now,
we are, or we say we are.
well, we say we are. So where do you think a lot of this aid is going? Because I'm seeing a lot of stuff that Ukraine has depleted all the aid that we've given them, all the ammunition we've given them. Like, where is the money actually going?
I saw a write-up by a guy who was said to be as sharp as anyone in this business. I can't replicate it because it was a complex bit of reasoning, but he basically made the case that the US's military is really geared towards defeating a weak ally, a weak opponent. So we've got a military that's designed to hit a banana republic and to do so decisively, and that our military is not designed to take on a peer. And so the guy went through this. What I do remember is it was a fascinating analysis where he talked about all the how air superiority is irrelevant at this point, and various things that we think of historically as the way the U.S. owns an opponent. So that won't work with Russia. That won't work with China. That won't work with any of these big guys. And so my big fear is that the neocons just can't. They somehow have never gotten over the fact that the Cold War ended. And so for them, it never ended. And always being vigilant against potential enemies is fine, but they want to fight them. And I just think they're not. So when I'm feeling particularly angry, I say that we should be sending weapons to Putin, not to Zelensky. Yeah, that pisses people off.
Yeah.
I mean, that really gets them going. But it would end the war. And I know. We both know that if all of a sudden the U.S. stood up to the podium and said, we're sending no more weapons to Ukraine, the war would be over by sundown.
Oh, absolutely. And
then what the hell are we doing then? Then the question is, what the hell are we doing? Why do we care about where a border is in that region of the world? The borders move all for 2 millennia. The borders just vibrate and oscillate. And, Russia took over Ukraine in something like 1687. Why do we say Ukraine's not part of Russia?
It seems that Crimea and that Donbass region are really strategically important. I believe for different rare earth minerals. I'm from what I hear what Putin's saying, I've heard him mention the neo-Nazi threat in Ukraine, wanting to get that under control. I've heard him mention the biolabs, but again, in this age, like what is real, what is not, what is fake news, the West will say that's Russian propaganda. What are we to believe?
No. So there were acknowledged 46 bioweapons labs in Ukraine. They tried to dust them off. I once read, I think it was called Demon in the Freezer, many, many years ago, a book about the bioweapons labs in the decaying former Soviet Union and how, there were rusty padlocks on sheds with, roofs that are decaying, and they got all sorts of bad stuff in it. So it was a horror story. Those are not the labs. We've had 30 years to clean those up. These are 46 labs run by us, not by the Ruskies. These are not former Russian labs. I have this sense, I'll call it a sense or a theory or whatever, that the reason, why would you put them in Ukraine? Well, you need a country that's first world enough to support a bioweapons lab. You put it in Nigeria, you'd run out of power on a bad day, right? You also need a country that's third world enough that you can harvest human beings that are expendable. And so it needs to be offshore, because we can't be taking soccer moms from Greenwich, Connecticut, and jamming them full of anthrax. And so I think Ukraine was a good place to be. And we acknowledge they exist. The Pentagon acknowledged they exist, and Victoria Nuland acknowledged they exist. The Nazis are truly unambiguously Nazis. They're not Nazis metaphorically. They're real Nazis. They celebrate Nazi heritage. They celebrate Stepan Bandera's birthday. They celebrate various characters. Chrystia Freeland has Nazi roots, the Canadian second in command. There's just all sorts of badness there. For Russia to take out the Azov battalion militarily, which I think was his big goal. I think when we decided we were going to use Ukraine to smack Russia, we decided we would use the Azov battalion as the fighters. We looked at Ukraine. We said, these guys can't do anything. The Azov guys are tough. Let's train them. Let's fund them. It's like funding a Mexican drug cartel. It's not big, but they're mean bastards. They're junkyard dogs. And I think Putin had to take out the Azov guys. And people who don't believe Azovs are Nazis, just Google it. They're so bad that Google can't even clean up the mess that's left behind.
Yeah,
They
CNN's
were on
reported
civil
on it.
rights. Yeah, exactly. All you have to do is search it, do a Google. I used to do Google searches and filtered it pre-2022. You don't even have to do that. You just Google it and you find that these guys are mean, they're ruthless, they're savage, they torture people, they kill civilians, they kill Ukrainians. And so for Putin to go in and exterminate those guys in the world of exterminations, it's one that I can live with.
Mm-hmm. So
they seem like they're worthy of being taken out.
What is Zelensky's role in all of this? Is he working with the Azov battalion? Are they reporting to him? Is he reporting to them? What do you think's going on with that connection?
Well, I don't know now. In fact, I've kind of lost interest in Ukraine because it's turned into like World War I, where it's like, well, what's going on now? Well, they're still aiming at each other across the across the trenches, right? It becomes unreportable after a while. So guys shooting at each other for 5 straight years, right? In 2022, there was some word on the street that Putin felt he could work with Zelensky. And there's about 40 guys, I would say, who I identified writing about this from a non-propagandist way. Western journalists who were saying this is what's actually happening. And one of the theories was actually that Putin thought he could work with him so well that he probably had in Kyiv an extraction team ready to pull us out if the Azov guys decided he was not of value to them anymore. And so that they would take him out. And as a corollary of that theory was that the Azov guys had approached Zelensky and basically said, with Victoria Nuland encouraging him, you're with us, or you're going to die a horrible death. So all of a sudden, he became an Azov guy. And we'd all succumb to that, right? And then in April of 2022, he was about to ink a deal with Putin to stop this fiasco. And I'm sure Zelensky would have come out of it himself okay. And then Boris Johnson showed up and said, NATO's going to kick your ass if you do, so don't even think about it. Wow. And so ever since then, they've been bribing the hell out of Zelensky. And for those who don't know, the bribes were going through the FTX crypto fund and Sam bank fraud, bankrupt fraud, who, by the way, just got a bunch of his indictments disappeared.
How?
Well, because he's deep state.
Yeah.
That's how, right?
Yeah.
The same way that Hunter Biden got charged with jaywalking, right?
Hey,
I mean, it's just
Professor Dave, Hunter Biden's the smartest guy I know. Come on, man.
Yeah. I just saw pictures. I never know if someone's actually photoshopped or something, but there's pictures of Hunter with like 6-year-old girls now that are popping up.
I'm going to let the audience do their own research into the Hunter Biden laptop. Let's remember the mainstream media and intelligence experts told us it was Russian disinformation.
Right.
So let's remember that because we weren't even supposed to see it. Now.
But that was a known lie from day one.
Yeah.
Day one. There was a doubt. When the New York Post comes out and says, we got the laptop, it's a big goddamn mess. You knew it was right, especially when they booted the New York Post off of every social media.
Of course. And, we're seeing, headline news as of, I believe, yesterday, Hunter Biden expected to plead guilty to tax-related misdemeanor crimes as part of a plea deal, plus, I believe, a gun charge. So right. What do you think this is about? Is this just like to pretend they're going hard against Hunter
Well, so the question, I believe, and I don't know anything about legal shit, and I've been watching for this, is have they inked some deal with Hunter? Are they trying to ink a deal with Hunter that not only convicts him of something, but gets him unconvictable of everything else? Can you ink such a plea deal? A plea deal that gives him legal protection not to be charged with anything else. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if you can write such a deal or not.
I am also not a lawyer, but could Biden just pardon him? Does it work
He
like that?
could, but that's more gruesome looking, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, at this point, anything can happen, right? Um.
Right, right. And when they have, I kicked Tucker off. The
Oh
Russia
man.
Fallujah story worked out really well for them, and they don't care about that now.
Now let's get back to Hunter Biden because I got one more question I want to ask you about Ukraine because this is one of the missing pieces I can't seem to figure out. What is China's role in all of this? I don't know if you've seen the news. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken went to China and he stated that the United States does not support Taiwan's independence. So I'm just scratching my head like, hold on, wait, we have to support Ukraine's independence, but we're not
Well, so
supporting
the funny
Taiwan?
thing is, and I've never paid close attention to China, Taiwan, in part because I've always had the sense that China is not in a rush to take Taiwan. At one point, I thought, oh, yeah, they're going to take Taiwan in August or this or that. And then I realized Chinese are very patient. They just know that at some point in the future, they will take Taiwan. What I don't remember is anyone at Blinken's level so openly stating that it's a single country. So I sort of sat up on that, and either I had simply never listened to the communications from our State Department, or something changed, and I don't know which. What do you think? It seemed
Well,
really overt to me.
I think it was damage control. I think that we're seeing China. We're hearing reports that China's supplying Russia with weapons and ammunition that they're claiming to be for civilian use, not for the war. Russia's supplying China with oil and gas. Also, we know China and with Russia part of the BRICS nations. It just seems to be like a controlled demolition of the West. So I
Yes.
think that Anthony Blinken, who I would classify as a deep state globalist operative, whatever terminology you want to use, I think that's him just going over there playing damage control with their handlers. I think it's their handlers.
Yeah. So it feels to me, and it's felt to me for about a year now. So the world seems screwed up at a level that I can no longer even fathom. And so I thought I knew what was happening, and now I don't. And it feels to me like we're seeing a profound moment in history where alliances are being completely rearranged. And all of a sudden you got the Saudis and the Indians talking to Putin instead of to us. And it's not just about China taking Taiwan. It's not just about China supporting Russia, which we kind of knew they would. That's all
Mm-hmm.
generic stuff. But if we've got a complete realignment of allies, and I don't think, for example, Europe's safe. I don't think we know what Germany's going to do. I wouldn't be shocked. I saw an article from about 2014 that basically said our biggest risk is if Germany and Russia form an alliance with Russia's resources and German technology.
Well, that's basically what's going to happen because how long will Europe be the punching bag and they're, taking all the damage from what's going on right now, economically and politically. So how long before they say enough of NATO and they're out? I mean, that's kind of what I see when I see these nations joining BRICS. That wouldn't have happened before.
Well, and it's not like we have any doubt about who blew up the pipeline. I don't think there's much doubt that it's not good for Germany.
Not
It's
good for all of
conceived
Europe.
not good for all of Europe. I don't think there's much doubt of that. I could be wrong in that, but um, and the U.S. we have to come up with all these reasons why it's Ukrainians and this and that because not because we don't know who did it, but because they can never admit who did it because it was an act of war. And so if Ukraine did it, then you say, well, of course it's an act of war. They're in a war. So if you can dump it by dumping on Ukraine, even if it's it's farcically not believable,
Mm-hmm.
at least you don't have to step up and say, look, it was the U.S. They'll
Yeah,
never admit it was the U.S. They just
it,
won't. They can't admit it. That's like it pleading guilty to an act of war.
Yeah, they're gonna say it was a pro-Ukrainian group that
Yeah, right.
sabotaged the pipeline.
It happens to be U.S. soldiers, right?
Yeah, right. Like as if
Pro,
NATO's not pulling the strings behind all of that.
right.
Now, you talk about the war and what's going on there. Now, where it's going to get real interesting is we're right around a corner. I don't know. Time has just like flown by since the supreme leader, the most popular president of all time, Joe Biden's been elected. So we're going into we're going into
My
this
sarcasm meter is
we're going
pegged.
into we're going into this election, Professor Dave, and I tell you what, I talk about this to my audience a lot. I've never felt more conflicted. Now, let's go with the big five. Let's go with RFK Jr., Trump, DeSantis, Biden, and I guess I'll throw Gavin Newsom in there because it seems like he's making a
Oh,
lot of
he is
headway.
so. You got to throw Kamala in there.
Oh, I can't. Oh, come on, don't tell me that. I can't
No,
even
you
think of
have
that.
to. You have to. She's so bad. She's so bad. I drove with a black limo driver in New Orleans about a year ago, and I always, these are opportunities. So I started asking him questions, sort of delicately at first. And by the end, he was ranting pro MAGA, and it was really amazing. And he said nobody in the hood can stand Kamala. So Kamala has no following. So I only
Oh,
mentioned Kamala. I did a poll on Twitter the other day. I said, we all have our opinion of who should be president. But I gave a list of people who you would like to see second on the ticket. It's a more interesting list, actually. Because you get
we
a lot of Trump votes, a bunch of DeSantis votes for the ticket, for the
you
first
mean
on
as
the
vice
ticket.
president? You mean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I went fishing through the potential vice president candidates. Which of these would be a transformational number two ticket person? And I threw Tulsi Gabbard, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Ramaswamy, and I can't remember Tim Scott. And I think RFK won it.
RFK needs to be on, I've just gone all in on RFK Jr. I want him
I
as the
have to.
president.
I have to. I have
If
to.
he's not, I
I'm
understand
a
how it
Reagan
works.
Republican, all in on
Hmm. But yeah, he
RFK.
needs
On
to be on a
RFK.
ticket, at least VP or I don't know, maybe in Fauci's role. Who knows?
I think he could end up being an independent.
Well, I- that would be interesting.
He's got more momentum than Ross Perot had because Ross Perot didn't have the emotional backing that Kennedy has.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, Ross Perot, he was as an independent, he had more votes than any other independent before, I think.
He was big, yeah. He was a force to be reckoned with. And then he kind of backed out. He made some reference of threats against his life at the time. I thought was now I'm thinking, of course they threatened his life.
Of
That's what these
course.
guys do. Of course they did. So RFK, I don't think they'll let him be president. I and you could say, well, if he gets elected, I go, no, I don't think they'll let him be president, right? I mean, I think he gets a cap in the head before he gets to be president. But his voice is getting out there. That Hotez RFK fight did tremendous damage to a number of people, and it was RFK's best day. It was his best day. His Joe Rogan interview was his greatest moment because what it did is it undid all the smearing that had taken place for the last 30 years.
Why are people like, not to pick on Dr. Hotez because he already accused us of bullying him when all, Joe Rogan did was ask him for a debate. He's an expert, so shouldn't he jump at the opportunity to debate? But why is this fear of debating on these vaccine issues? Why are they so afraid of it? If the science
Yeah,
is
that's
settled,
a rhetorical question,
right?
I presume. Yeah,
Right.
it's because he would be destroyed. He couldn't hold up to RFK. RFK would eat his lunch, and then the COVID narrative would be destroyed in a
Is
very public way.
where do
and
you
and
think
then the vaccine narrative would be destroyed in a very public way, and then RFK's star would rise even faster, which would send pharma into conniption fits. So
which one of these candidates do you think has the best stance on the COVID narrative? Because it does seem that it is
it's got to be
unraveling.
RFK. It's got to be
Oh, of
RFK.
course. Of
Right.
course.
RFK, I've analyzed RFK a lot, and there's a lot of topics that he could lose some support from me, right? I don't mean I wouldn't vote for him. If you're looking for the perfect candidate, you're going to go to your grave waiting for that guy. But at some point you say, look, I gotta take the best I can get. There's a lesser of evil model. And I paid attention to some hot button issues, and RFK's been holding up very, very well.
Mhm.
So,
Very
for
well.
example, on climate change, I am a believer that the climate change narrative is complete crap,
Mhm.
just utter crap. It's a multi tens of trillions of dollar grift, and it's about power. It's about who knows what, all the things that are so far down into the onion that I can't begin. But for starters, it's about tens of trillions of dollars that are going to be spent to defeat a foe that is scientifically impossible to demonstrate. And I was talking to a guy who's a former vice president of one of the biggest chemical companies in history. And he said, when I get into this discussion, I just point out that to predict the temperature in the year 2100 requires solving nonlinear equations that are not possible. And so as a consequence, they cannot predict the temperature in 2020 and 2100. They can't even, they're not even including clouds. And so that's a hot bone issue for me, because I don't want them strip mining the earth of all the minerals to make cars that don't do any good and make people stinking rich because they get stinking rich. And
Listen.
RFK has an interesting stance, though. He acts like he believes the climate change story,
Mhm.
but then he says, but this problem should be identified and solved by market forces. And I'm totally okay with that.
Mhm.
If some guy can invent a new car that's better for the environment, I'm fine with that. Tesla's not better for the environment. Tesla rapes the environment.
Terrible for the environment. Terrible. The
Terrible for the
cobalt,
environment.
lithium mines,
Right. Slave labor in
slave
the
labor.
Congo, everything. No, you buy a Tesla because you think you're being a good person. You're being a dick.
Yeah, like how is electricity generated? Through fossil
Right. But
fuel.
the battery, you strip mine the earth to make that damn battery.
So let's elaborate a little bit more. Let's jump into climate change. So it's funny you brought that up because I got a quote right here. Can you see this? Oh no, you probably can't see it. This is the great
Greta Thunberg.
Greta
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg, and she says this is from 2018. A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. So, when we bring up COVID, we bring up climate change. I know a lot of people, their gut reaction is to, trust the science, or like, why would you argue against climate change? It is a true threat. Professor Dave, could you please elaborate on how, if we were a communist regime, why communist regimes love COVID and why they love the climate change narrative? Because I think that's what people need to see is the evolution of communism through these type of ideologies.
So, trying to understand the world, there's a bold goal. I started deep diving into books on propaganda. So I read Matthias Desmet's book, Psychology of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt, who I wish that pain on nobody because it's very difficult reading. The True Believer, a bunch of them. They don't come to me when I need them. And fear, confusion, and terror and threat are all absolutely central to authoritarian regimes. So that's what you do. Now, The True Believer is a fascinating book. It's a very short book. I highly recommend it, by a guy named Eric Hoffer. It was highly recommended to me. A guy said, no, Dave, you have to read it. So I did. And it really changed the way I look at the world. It goes through how these mass movements start and how they start. There's kind of a standing army of nitwits who fuel them, who are the troops on the battlefield. And he describes them in unflattering terms as people who have nothing to lose by change because their lives suck, they're miserable, they often are self-loathing, they're looking for change because nothing could be this bad, so why not? That sort of approach. So this is where, you know, income inequality starts to play into the game now, because you get all these people who are saying, look, I can't pay my bills. Why wouldn't I support a new approach to this game? And by signing off on a movement, they achieve several things. One is, first and foremost, they are now part of something bigger and grander, which gives their lives purpose. They also have an explanation for why they're unhappy, which doesn't involve accepting the fact that they made life choices that just suck, or that life just threw a bad hand of cards, right? And so you say, oh, it's not my fault. It's Donald Trump's fault that I'm unhappy. And so in many ways they elevate. Now, interesting. Here's what's really interesting is that Hoffer says that if you look at these, whether you go back to antiquity and religious movements or you name it, there's almost always sacrifice involved. So if you look at guys walked around the streets, whipping themselves and making themselves suffer and giving up earthly belongings, and some guy lived on a 10 by 10 foot platform, 30 feet in the air for 40 years to sacrifice to somehow get closer to God. And so the climate change crowd wants to give up their cars. They want to give up their consumption. They want to, because it somehow is about cleansing their souls. And so that, and I don't quite know what that achieves, but it's common to all the movements is sacrifice.
Isn't it the goal of communism that, the individual is part of the collective, the
bigger
grand movement?
That's right. And so individualism requires you take individual responsibility. And if your life sucks, you don't like doing that.
And look, I'm all about the environment. When the military industrial complex, when they go green, I'll go green. When China goes green, I'll go green. Until then, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I actually don't want the military guys going green. I want them, if we're going to have a military and you accept it as a legitimate thing, I want them to have the best, whatever that is, the best. I don't want a tank that they're wheeling things out to charge it with a battery, right? Now that makes no sense. So when the military went woke and went green, I'm going, oh, we are in trouble. Oh, so I want a killing machine out there. Now, at the same time, I'm profoundly anti-war at this point. I have realized that none of the wars are supportable at some point, and if they land on our shores, let them have it.
Everyone loses in war, especially nuclear war.
The bankers win.
Yep, that is true. I'm sorry, that is correct. You mentioned Donald Trump. We haven't gotten into him too much. His indictment, I'm sure you're all caught up on that. Is this just a complete sham? Is this to get him to not run? Or are they really going to put him in jail? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, there's the question of whether he's guilty of something of consequence, and that's debatable. So the guy I've been getting most of my information from, just because I've got to be selective, is Jonathan Turley, who's a constitutional scholar. And throughout the whole thing, he's been saying it's not clear they have jurisdiction. It's not clear that this charge is valid. He's been the whole time saying that this whole thing looks just like pure political motivation. In a vacuum, I could accept the idea that maybe Trump did something wrong. But as soon as you put it into context, you say, compared to Biden, no, not even close. Not even close. And why is it not the case that a president who's accepted tens of millions of dollars from foreign countries, why is that not treason? I don't know. He's owned by China. He's owned by Ukraine. Why is it not treason? Why should he not be convicted, hung from the neck until dead?
Because our DOJ has been weaponized and has been taken over. That's the only
exactly
explanation.
Right. And I was watching Durham this morning, and Durham seems to be one of the only guys who gets that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So Professor Dave, what's your kind of gut feeling on, who's going to be on the ticket, for this presidential election? Because I'm really confused at this point, a part of me thinks Trump may drop out, that they may make a deal with him. Hey, we'll drop all the charges. Forget it ever happened. He drops out. Maybe his ego doesn't allow that. I know DeSantis had a little steam early on, but it seems like he's lost that. So who do you think is going to be? And I'm hearing rumors that Biden might drop out. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm pretty sure that in a normal election, both candidates have been vetted by the people who matter, and they don't care who wins. So the candidates might care and the parties might care, but those are just the chess pieces. So I saw a meme the other day where they said something like Congress has got something like a 13% approval rating and a 97% reelection rating. So I go, how is that possible, right? And the answer is because the elections are rigged. They're biased to the extent that once you have the power, you can't pull it away.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not rigged. But I also think they're rigged. I mean, I think that I don't accept any of the arguments that says they're not rigged. I know smart people who I'm supposed to trust who say they're not rigged. I do not believe them. I believe they're rigged.
We're gonna find out really soon, I think,
I'm
Professor
not.
Dave.
Are we? Are we?
Well, I think so. I think this next presidential election, if it doesn't wake people up, especially, if Biden wins again, it's just insanity at this point that, he could get that many votes that, Biden could get more votes, more black votes than the first black president. That doesn't even make sense.
Well, but see, that's within the error bar of reality to the extent that you could say, look, the anti-Trump hatred could generate a vast number of Biden votes. Mm-hmm. So would I want to stake my life on the fact that the number of votes Biden got was impossible? I have several bits of reasoning on the election rigging. One is for decades I've been reading about how easy it is to rig a machine. And YouTube used to have them all over the place where some computer scientists would say, okay, here's the deal. And he'd go in the computer and he'd say, now go ahead and vote. And the person would vote and you'd see the vote go to the wrong guy. He says, it takes 2-3 minutes to do this. This is easy. I became alert to it in earnest back when I read when Bush was elected that the CEO of Diebold, who controlled the voting machines back then, was a Bush fundraiser. I go, the guy who owns the voting machines should pretty much be staying out of the game, in my opinion, right? That's a problem. So that bothered me. And then I found out that the voting machines went to Dominion. And so I dug into Dominion, and you find out, first of all, it's Canadian. And at the time, I'm thinking, well, I probably trust them more than the United States. And then I realized not anymore after, the Canadians are looking like a bunch of neo-Nazis too. And then I find out Dominion actually wasn't a standalone company, and it didn't click until this year how it happened. But I found out that Dominion was owned by UBS, a subsidiary of UBS, which was dominantly owned by a company in Beijing. So basically, our voting machines were owned by China. And then when you hear rumors that the voting machines were hooked up to the internet, which is said to be illegal, you go, well, we just hooked them up to Beijing. And those of us who watched the election where Trump went into the evening, 1:30, I went to bed. Trump had all the swing states, sort of light pink. Woke up 6 hours later and they had all gone light blue. And I'm going, no way, not a chance. So people say, oh, they didn't have the precincts from Detroit in yet. I go, yeah, but those predictions, the guys who make those predictions, they know that the Detroit votes are not in, and they know how they're going to vote. Those predictions aren't just based on some raw number. That's AI predicting that crap. And by morning it was. So then you say, well, it went to court 61 times and it got refuted 61 times. No, it never got to evidentiary hearing. Not a single case actually went to court. People stepped in the courtroom. That was it. They all got thrown on jurisdiction issues, procedural issues, all sorts of things. 61 for 61. The Wisconsin Supreme Court had called his colleagues cowards for not taking the case, right? So there's real conflict there. And you get I was told by an NSA guy that the 61 Mules documentary was not valid, so I have to question that. But then there's a bottom line analysis that I do that doesn't require data, and that is we watched them ride Trump and shoot at Trump with every weapon they had for 4 years. Absolutely every weapon they had. Is someone with a straight face going to tell me that they forgot to rig the election? Is there any chance that they said, oh, we can do everything to get Trump, but, oh, we can't rig the election? And the answer is no. Zero chance that they didn't take the election rigging as on the table.
I mean, the pipe burst in Georgia, you had
Oh
a
my
lot
God,
of,
yes.
you had a lot of strange
And
anomalies, I
the
think.
problem is that both parties wanted him out.
Mm-hmm.
So the guys who would have stood up to them, they all got reelected by the same process. You got reelected, you're going to question the veracity of the voting machines? And then one day I was doing an analysis of COVID bailouts, in particular ones that look cheesy, and I started picking up on threads of various politicians whose brother-in-law got a ton of money out of COVID that he shouldn't have gotten, the scandalous levels. And I kind of grouped them all together and said, wait a minute, they're all Republicans. I go, that doesn't look good for a guy who's right of center. And then I carefully, and I go, oh, look at where these politicians are coming from. Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania. And I go, those are the swing states. So the guys who got a ton of money out of COVID also happen to be in the states where the election rigging had to occur. I can't make a deeper connection than that, but it creeps me out.
Coincidentally, the mail-in ballots, because of COVID,
oh, yeah.
So it's like it's all.
I could believe COVID was designed to rig the election. I can even entertain that idea. That they said, okay, let's do the following. Let's have a goddamn pandemic. Let's screw this guy, right? There's all sorts of ways we can win this.
Absolutely.
But once they started doing wholesale mailing of ballots, then the checks and balances of the system were completely obliterated. And so, it is what it is. They took out Kerry Lake. Look at the story down there. And Hobbs, Katie Hobbs was such a loser. And Fetterman.
Oh, geez.
Fetterman can't put together a clause of a sentence, let alone a sentence.
And who funded all of it? FTX, George Soros. Look at the money.
And by the way, Mitch McConnell gave Kerry Lake zero campaign support. So the 2022 election was about wiping out MAGA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone who had MAGA attached, if they were attached to the MAGA wagon, they got whacked.
Well, I think that's why they wanted his tax return so bad, because, not only, to see, because clearly he's not going to be doing anything illegal, because, he's got CPAs that's handling his taxes, but they wanted to see all the companies that was funding them and where he was getting all his money from, because they were going to go after them. I think that's why they went after the taxes.
Or they knew that he wouldn't give them up, right? Because your lawyer would say, don't give them up. Why would you give your tax returns to your enemy?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they knew they could scream about his tax returns till they're purple in the face.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like now yelling at Hotez, right? Oh, debate him. He's not going to debate ever. So it's the same sort of thing. You got him on the ropes. You might as well punch him out.
What do you think's been the biggest turn in the whole COVID vaccine narrative? Because now it just seems like we're in a different world where we're allowed to talk about it, for one, but two, like the way the narrative's unraveled. What do you think's been the biggest catalyst to that?
I think the change at Twitter.
Wow. Incredible.
Because the Twitter files, Elon Musk all of a sudden opened the floodgates. I actually think Jack Dorsey was encouraging Musk to open the floodgates. Mm-hmm. I've always had this feeling that Dorsey was a fundamentally good guy who was disgusted by what they did to his company. So I keep this, I think it was Melody song, look what they've done to my song, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. They tied it up in a plastic bag and turned it all upside down, Mom. I think Dorsey is disgusted by what the politics have done to his dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's clear. You can see the difference in Twitter now, and even some of the stuff I see on there kind of blows my mind. I'm
It's
like, wow,
open
they're letting them.
season now.
Oh,
It's
open
open season
season.
now.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
And Elon does it too, right? Elon went after Hotez bigly, right? By the
Yeah,
way, the
Mark.
term bigly, the bigly I use all the time. I love to say bigly. That's a Trump term, right? But it turns out he didn't say bigly. He said big league. But
Mark.
everyone says he said bigly.
Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he actually came to Dr. Hotez's defense and said that, that Elon,
Right?
all them, they were bullying him. And I'm like, where was this guy at when people like me that didn't want to get the vaccine, or people that, had questions were raised? We were the ones getting bullied. Nobody stood up for us.
Oh, he was full vaccine Nazi.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And
100% vaccine Nazi.
all about the money.
And then the
It's
question is why? Well,
NBA.
he's former
Ah.
tech. So you come out of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is tech,
Mm-hmm.
is deep state from head to
Mm-hmm.
toe. And the Mossad owns a ton of it. The CIA owns a ton of it. The startups, the angel investors for Facebook and these companies were all intelligence companies. So Silicon Valley, the chips being made by the sovereign states from whence the chips are coming are putting back doors in them. All of Silicon Valley is riddled with conflict.
Yeah.
And so
Facebook.
who knows what Cuban is?
Yeah,
Who knows?
Facebook was a CIA operation that they switched to a private company, it seems, to, get all of our data. That's the only thing it seems it could be for.
Right. And so we don't know who Cuban is. We don't know anything about him. Um, you know, guys like Peter Thiel, who I like some of the stuff he does, but you got to remember all the things he's done that have got to be. I'm reading Whitney Webb's 2-volume series right now. I'm almost done with volume 1.
She's so awesome, man.
She is. Her book is a tough read. It's really hard because Whitney essentially connects puzzle pieces. So she'll say, "Here's person A, here's person B. They know each other. This is a problem, that sort of thing." And so her book is scholarly, comprehensive, but it's not a narrative. It's not a story. It's not McCullough, not the vaccine guy, but the storyteller
Hmm.
that winds a great story about some historical event. And so you're overwhelmed by the detail. Overwhelmed by the detail. Every once in a while, a name will come up, and you go, "I didn't know he was crooked," that sort of thing. But I find myself going, okay, forget about the name. Let's call it Banker A knows
Hmm.
CEO B of Company C. I'm formulating this sort of worldview. Did you watch the show Yellowstone?
I watched a few episodes. I don't watch much TV. I know the premise, though.
Well, for anyone listening who watches Yellowstone, just scale that global. Just take
Hmm.
Yellowstone and make it go global. That's the world we live in my opinion. And Whitney, I think there's a quantity of money and power, which they go together. And by the way, I hate the discussion in terms of just money. I think when they say Fauci's doing it for the money, they're doing it for the money. I don't think so. Like when Bud Light goes super woke and they didn't do it for the money, and you go, well, they blew it. And I go, no, they didn't blow it. You couldn't possibly look at Bud Light's clientele and think that putting a transgender person on the can is a good idea. You would have to have an IQ of around 12 to draw that conclusion. So there's another reason they did it. I just don't know what it is. Why would Disney show cartoons? A cartoon woman in the aisle with cartoon characters picking out Tampax,
Hmm.
picking out feminine hygiene products in a Disney movie. What the hell is that all about? And so these companies look like they're self-destructing. I just read the other day that Walt Disney bought the farmland. I've always known that when Walt Disney bought the acreage for Disney World, which is huge, right?
Hmm.
So how do you buy up all that swampland quietly?
Hmm.
because once people realize what you're up to, all of a sudden the price just took off, right? And it's supposedly he used the help of CIA shell companies to buy it all up. And then the
It
question is, what does it mean? And the answer is that the CIA from the start knew that if you want to control the message, you have to control the messenger.
mhm.
So the CIA immediately infiltrated Hollywood, immediately infiltrated the mass media, immediately got control of everything.
Yeah, I believe it was even that was declassified. I believe it was called Operation Paperclip, where they,
Yep.
the mainstream media, a lot of these Anderson Cooper's CIA, like what in the world? But yeah, I think what you're seeing with Bud Light, I just think that that's, this whole ESG narrative, I think that's just a takedown of American institutions, because think about it. Those CEOs, they're not losing anything. You know who's losing money? All the local bars that sell Bud Light, all the local delivery drivers that deliver Bud Light. This is hurting the American way of life. And it's pushing their agenda. Obviously, it's pushing their destabilization agenda, their communist agenda through these fringe groups, through these ideologies to implement communism. It's the new way to implement communism. That's exactly what
And
it
then
is.
the question is, who is they? And you never know. They're not people that we know. We don't even know if they know each other. So it's more of a movement and an ideology that's taken
Mhm.
hold than anything. But if you a great description, and Trump seems to have picked up on this early. He said they're not coming for me, they're coming for you. I stand in their way. And
Got to get through him. Yeah.
I think he's more accurate than that. Sounds like a catchphrase for a politician, but I think he's more accurate actually in that if you're a globalist. So we went from tribe to village to city to state, castles, kingdoms to state to countries. And the kind of the next move is globalism.
Mhm.
And to globalize, who's in your way? Well, for starters, the United States, right? We are the ones who have this fiercely independent, group of characters who drink Bud Light, right? And they what the United States has, it has an upper class that can be bribed and a lower class that can be stomped. But what they also have is a robust middle class
That's in decline since.
that is not only in decline, but let's say you decided long ago that you were going to have to somehow deal with it. It is being pushed in decline.
Mhm.
And so when you bring transgender nuns or cross-dressing, at least nuns, into Dodger Stadium, it's not just a bad idea. It's a garishly bad idea. It's an in your face. And one of the things you get out of reading about rising authoritarianism is one of the most common emotions to those who are witnessing it is confusion,
Mhm.
disorientation. You don't know what's happening. You can see it. It's like a gravitational field. You can feel it, but you don't know what's happening. You and I in this conversation, which layer the onion metaphor, which layer yet are we at the wrong layer, right? We're confused. So I think that the goal is to rip the middle class apart. And the COVID lockdown would achieve that.
Yep.
The getting the left and the right fighting each other would achieve that. I have a theory that I've presented in public forums, fora. I presented in front of 500 people in an investment conference the theory that many, if not most, of the school shootings are sovereign state sponsored.
Mhm.
They have common properties that are too predictable.
It's the psychedelics. It's big pharma. It's again, I don't see
But
why.
it's I think it's MK Ultra actually. I
MK
think
Ultra 100%.
well, but the claim is that went away, and I'm saying, well, what if it didn't? Well,
Yeah.
if you're running MK Ultra and your goal, this is not deniable. The goal of MK Ultra was to develop a bunch of brainwashed people who
Mhm.
not only would do anything they wanted them to do, but wouldn't even know why they did it or what they did. So it's born identity crap, right? And then the question is, well, how do you do that? Well, first and foremost, you can't do it on lab rats. You need an experimental lab, and that experimental lab is a bunch of drugged out, disenfranchised teens So Ted Kaczynski was an MK Ultra product, and I thought it was a failure. I thought it was one of these ones where they drove him nuts, and then he went nuts, and he started killing people. More recently, I've said no, it worked. Ted Kaczynski worked. He did the experiment. They did, and then I found out the head of MK Ultra had his paws into Timothy McVeigh. You're not gonna believe this. Had his paws into Jack Ruby. It's a very strange story.
Look at Kanye West. Kanye West has come out and
Kanye.
exposed a lot of it, and guys, a lot of this is declassified. You can look up, what MK Ultra is and what it's actually achieving. But you mentioned this destabilization of the middle class. It's obviously that's what they want, but more importantly, they don't want this American ideology to spread other places.
Who is the they?
So when I say they, I speak, we hear terms like the deep state, we hear the globalist. I just think it is a group of people, the Rothschilds, the Bill Gates, these type of individuals who have generational wealth, and is in their best interest to have us divided, fighting on everything from gender to, political affiliation, to have us divided, to keep us where we are, to squash the middle class into poverty so that they can stay in power. It's pretty obvious at this point, but do I know all their names? No, but it's clearly that this group of people, think about it, they're with the current thing. Every one of them has the same ideology. So
I was on a Zoom call with a former national security analyst. I didn't know who he was. It was actually a doctor/COVID-based Zoom call with all the famous guys. You name them, they've been through this Zoom call. It was an amazing experience to watch them all. Scott Atlas, Bobby Kennedy, they all came through this Zoom group at one time or another. And one day, this guy, bespectacled character, started spouting off about Hegelian philosophy. We didn't all know each other. That's the funny. There's about 100 of us. And so a bunch of the guys knew each other, but there was, there were people like me sort of wandering, and they didn't know who I am until one day I gave a talk to the group. And so then they knew who I was. And this guy starts talking about Hegelian philosophy, which I don't really understand at all, but it's a philosophy. And at first I'm thinking, oh, Stephen's totally gone off the rails here. What's this about? And then he's trying to make some really interesting points. And someone interrupts and says, what are you, a professor of philosophy or something? And he says, no, actually, I'm trained as a lawyer, but I used to be a national security analyst. And all of a sudden, I reel back with a whole, right? He proceeds to explain that the Arab culture is basically Hegelian philosophy based. And that to understand the Arabs, you have to understand Hegelian philosophy, because they could be talking to each other. It would be like if you were trying to understand the woke world. You'd have to know what inclusion means. You'd have to know what non-binary means. You'd have to know the vocabulary. You'd have to know the thinking. You'd have to be James Lindsay. You'd have to sort of absorb it all, become an expert. And so at one point I asked him, Stephen, who are the they? We're talking about something to do with the vaccine. I said, who are the they? We keep saying they. He said, I don't like to name names. This is a profound moment for me. He said, I don't like to name names because if you do, then it defines the target too precisely and you stop thinking. And it just clicked. He said, so if I say Bill Gates, then you get to say, okay, Bill Gates is evil. What's for dinner? I'm done. You can say, I don't know what to do about him, but at least you've resolved the question. So basically the message was, don't draw a conclusion that will get you to stop thinking. Be careful about those conclusions. So therefore, don't look at somebody like Biden and say, well, he's demented. And therefore, that explains it. And you go, no. Someone wrote that speech for him. He's saying those things for a reason, even if he himself is marginally coherent. And Fetterman and Kamala. Kamala looks like a total idiot, right? Complete total idiot, right? Tomorrow is today. Tomorrow will be today. Tomorrow, just incredible stuff. Her speeches, I call her Dr. Seuss imitation. Go dog go, and green eggs and ham, and but someone's writing her speeches, and there's not a speechwriter in the world who's on payroll who's that stupid. Mm-hmm. So what's the purpose of her speeches? And I keep coming back to the conclusion that the garishness of what we see, the garish disregard for our well-being, the garish disregard for the laptop story. Just the laptop's fake. And you say, no, it's real. No, it's fake. And you have no say over it, right? It's frustrating. It is part of the story.
I mean, it's George Orwell's 1984. I mean,
they want us to lose heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's I've never thought of it that way before. Now, can we circle back on some, Professor Dave? Elon Musk, he's come out and said the biggest threat to humanity is not thermonuclear war, but is AI.
Population. He actually said population.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, population collapse. He said that AI is a bigger threat than thermonuclear war. Yeah, he did say population collapse is the greatest threat to humanity. Which is
a Peter Zeihan model. He's kind of channeling Zeihan there.
We're hearing so much that we have too many people on the planet, and here is a billionaire saying that we need more people. Now, what do you think? What are your thoughts on AI? We know China is making a lot of advances in AI. We know ChatGPT's kind of blowing up right now. Are you kind of terrified by this technology, or is it going to be a net benefit for humanity?
No, I don't think it'll be a net benefit. I'm not terrified by it. So Elon was talking about 15% chance of survival of the human race. I can't get there. The day I get there is going to be a bad day, right? That's when I finally realized he was trying to tell me something important. But here, I was talking to a help desk, and she was so stupid. And I kept asking questions. I said, I don't know what you mean by this word. Explain. I'm not understanding this word. And I lost my to a person over the phone because I'm really aware of don't make their day miserable just because you're angry, right? And I said, go for yourself, and hung up. And then a few minutes later, I said, were you talking to a computer? Is it possible the reason she was frustrating you is because of the absurdity of the AI not being able to bring the human component? And then I formulated a thought that I don't think I got from someone, but it makes sense to me. And that is every decision a computer makes for you it's a binary decision. It's a yes or no. You slip in your credit card, the computer says yes or no. You go through a security gate, the computer says yes or no. Every computer-based decision is yes or no. There's no nuance. There's also almost no mechanisms available for getting a more nuanced approach. Now, sometimes you can get to the person in charge of the help thing, and then maybe get a person. I don't know. But every time a computer makes a decision for you, it's not nuanced. There's no discussion. It's just yes or no. And I realized that the further we get in, the more we have computers making decisions for us, the more authoritarian it will be by definition. And therefore,
the algorithm. Right.
And do you really want to read an article that you don't even know if it was written by a person? I have an acquaintance on Twitter. I'm a little torn because I've somehow gotten this funny feeling that he's not a real person, but I also have very good discussions with him because he's smart. If he's a computer, he's smarter than the other people on Twitter, and so I can't tell. I don't think he's a computer, but I've thought about the meaning of that. But I don't think we want to live in a world where everything is just a computer.
Or that an algorithm is making decisions for us.
Right.
Yuval Noah Harari.
A scary guy.
Yeah. And
by the way, for the record, I read Homo Deus. I read Sapiens. They sucked. They got rave reviews. They sucked. I've read enough anthropology to last a lifetime. His book sucked.
he is saying that, the human race is basically done by 2050. We'll all be merged with the machines, and that this algorithm that like it will be worshipped as gods because it's going to make your life so much easier. He's even gone on to say that the algorithm will be able to tell kids if they're gay or not at a young age. If they're struggling with that decision of coming out the closet. He describes in great
Well,
detail.
don't we already leave that to the kindergarten teacher? No, I don't see how someone like Harari can think the way he does without somehow having it click that what he's describing is evil.
He's on.
He seems to be so proud of it.
He's chosen his team. I mean, he's on the WEF team. He's on this transhuman. It's a transhumanist agenda. That's what they want.
Yeah. So there's a book called Technocracy by Patrick Wood, which is a worthy read too. And here's the problem. If you've got listeners who haven't gone down this path, I'm guessing they've long since hung up on you, us. But if there are some, once in a while, some young guy will approach me and say, I saw a podcast on this, or I read something you wrote on Zero Hedge, or whatever. I often say to them, don't go down that path. You're young, you've gone down that path. Is it making you happier? No. So I said, you got to learn how to make robots. You're going to have to find a spouse. You have to raise a family. You got shit to do, coach soccer. Don't start reading about George Soros and Yuval Harari and stuff like that. It'll just, I'm not happier. I'm not happier reading Whitney Webb's book, even though I think she's a friggin' genius.
Oh, she's a national. I don't even think she's in the country anymore. I think she was.
No, she's in Chile. She's in Chile. She came back for a while, and I'm thinking, she came back to the U.S. No, now she seems to be back in Chile.
She is just, guys, if y'all aren't familiar with Whitney Webb's material, YouTube Whitney Webb, Epstein, or Ghislaine Maxwell, or Bill Gates. Oh,
but
man.
There are people who are better at telling the story because Whitney is like this fountain of facts.
I like that, though. I like the gist.
No, I know it's because you are well versed.
Yeah.
Right. So the more sophisticated, if someone gives me a remedial book on organic chemistry, I don't want it because it's too remedial. I need something high level that fills in the stuff that I don't know. But Whitney Webb's book is really for the people who have got the structure to hang it off of already. Now we're going to get some. So here's what I've been digging into lately. I get on themes, and I started to dig into it, and then it started to hit the mainstream press. I dug into immunology in 2019. It was just pure luck. But I started watching TED Talks on vaccines, and so once in a while I get ahead. So anyway, I started reading about child trafficking. And I've now realized, so now I'm reasonably comfortable with the model. Not comfortable because it's an ugly model, but that Pizzagate's real, that there is a global pedophile ring of prominent, wealthy, powerful people, and they're doing spirit cooking. All that stuff seems to be unavoidably out there. Now, what's interesting is I was digging in, all of a sudden I found a Wall Street Journal article, and then next thing I know, I saw Tulsi Gabbard tweeting about trafficking. And I'm going, whole trafficking story is interesting. It's one of those ones where you say, that does not make sense. And that is that 85,000 kids supposedly have disappeared crossing the southern border. Now, the traffickers of children, they call crises, whether it's an earthquake, Ukraine, where you got all these orphans. Oh, we got to run them up here. Give them to me. I'll take them over the border, and boom, off they go, never to be seen again. They call it harvest season. So those events when Haiti goes through a living hell and they have to round up the kids, this is a lot like World War II when the Brits put the kids on the trains to get them out of harm's way, except now we put them on trains never to be seen again. And so I've been reading about this, 85,000 kids missing across the border. A couple of years ago, I wrote about this funny story in Wayfair. which is my first sort of little nibbling at the story, where Wayfarers just come to this online.
Furniture company, right?
Right. And they were selling these cabinets that looked like they were about $300 a piece for $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
And in the advertisement, there was a name.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the name of a missing kid. And I'm thinking, oh, this got to be Photoshop, right? And then all of a sudden, the CEO of the company sort of comes out and sort of denies it in a way where you go, that wasn't a denial. He didn't say that's a sort of denial. Like, well, yeah, we've kind of dealt with that. And then you find out that the CEO of the company, oh, what a good guy. He runs all these child foundations. I'm going, oh boy, that makes me feel better, right? Knowing that the CEO of a guy whose company seems to be marketing children under the guise of IKEA quality cabinets. And so that's when I first started paying attention. But there's a documentary coming out. So I just finished a documentary from 2020. There's a woman on Twitter named Liz Crocken, who apparently has been telling this story. She was very mainstream journalist, then she got into this story, and she's been telling it ever since, of all this child trafficking going on. So now 85,000 kids disappear. They're not selling them to people who live in trailer parks. These are expensive kids. You don't bring a kid over the border to sell them for $50. And then the spirit cooking, if your viewers don't know what that is, and it is undeniable that people practice this, it's just not known why, where they pretend to eat people. And
Maria Abramovich. Google Maria Abramovich.
Marina, is that Maria or Marina or something?
I think it's
something
Maria
like
Abramovich.
but yes, and she's the brains of this. And then you find out that the Hollywood elite is all over it, and the Lady Gaga and all these guys, and then you start replaying tapes of Mel Gibson ranting about how bad Hollywood is, and Elijah Wood and Corey Feldman. And you go, they've been trying to tell us that there's bad going on. And so there's a 4-part documentary coming out this summer called, I think it's called Out of the Shadows. No, that's the 2020 name.
Wait, this the Mel Gibson documentary that's coming
Mel
out?
Gibson's funded it. John Caviezel, I never know how to pronounce his name. Caviezel, who I like as an actor. He did the Christ. He played Christ in Mel Gibson's movie.
Okay.
He's doing a documentary on this guy who goes down to South America and recovers kids, kind of a Navy SEAL type guy. And he brings commandos down there and he raids them and he gets the kids, he brings them back. And that's going to come out this summer. And that could open some eyes. I'm going to write about that. So I'm starting to dig into it, and it's darkness though.
Oh, I mean, human trafficking, child trafficking, while that gets labeled a lot of conspiracy theories, again, we've seen what happened with Epstein Island. We've seen that,
but there's 2 layers. Epstein Island is trafficking minors to powerful people. I'm talking children.
Yeah, children
so I lose sleep over a 16-year-old finding themselves on Epstein Island. But they can't legally be consensual adults, but they could be consenting, and not so far away from adulthood that they don't know what they're consenting to. The world's filled with that. You take a 5-year-old, there is no consent there, right? You're now down in this slavery category.
Grooming,
and groomers and stuff like that. And so there's places that are trying to legalize sex with children now and stuff like that. It's a very strange world. So I'm going to write about that.
This is a lot of the ideology that's coming out of the WEF, a lot of the, whether it's the climate stuff, a lot of these crazy ideologies. But yeah, they love children from Haiti. They love children from South America because they don't have birth certificates. They're untraceable. They're untrackable,
So here's the problem I have. Revolutions come from the right or the left, right? This one is coming from the left. And it's not to say, it could have come from the right, but this was the ideas are coming from the left. You won't find a person ranting about transgenderism being good who voted for Trump, right? You won't find that. And what I don't understand is how the average people on the left, the former traditional liberals who were idealistic, how they're so quietly, tacitly signing off on this.
That I don't know.
And they call us right wingers who are screaming about it. They're calling us supremacists. They're calling us white supremacists.
Oh yeah.
Right. Well, then I'll wear that badge. Then if you're going to hang it on me, I don't give. You can eat my shorts. I just don't care. I'm going to tell the truth. So, but the left is the left were. I would say the left were the fuel behind, mandatory lockdowns and masking. It's not to say all the left. Don't get mad at me because you're left wing and you didn't support. But demographically, it came from the left. Now, when, for example, transgenders play women's sports, violently oppose that. That's insane. We work so hard to get women their sports, and we take it from them again. What kind of crap is that, right?
Where's the feminist?
I will go to battle over that one. And I'm sitting on the university campus, right? Just saying this to you is potential trouble. Come at me. I'm ready for them. Where the hell is the female sports authorities who work so hard to get these girls just to, who support the idea of driving your daughter to practice every day at 5 o'clock in the morning to swim laps for an hour before going to school and then swim laps for several hours after school to get a silver medal because some dude shows up? Where are the women who understand the sacrifice? Why are they? Riley Gaines showed up, right? Great, fantastic. But it was death to find a show up. They should have been screaming, if you are a female athlete and you shut your mouth, you are to blame. I'm calling you out. If you didn't open your goddamn mouth, I don't care if you had to cover your face and distort your voice. You should have found a way to scream about it.
Oh, I agree. And, if you think about it, the way it's a fraud, you notice it's never a transgender female that's entering a male combat sport because
I don't support that, by the way. I don't support that.
Me neither. But that's how it's a fraud, that if this was a true thing that was happening, that, men wanted to go be women and compete in women's sports, then you would be seeing women going to compete in men's sports against men. But you don't see that.
Ann Coulter, who is everyone's person to hate, and I think she reminds me of the woman on Yellowstone, the redhead who's mean all the time. But Ann Coulter said, is there nothing that the activists can keep their grubby paws off of? So I think that fathers ought to be able to take their sons to Boy Scouts and not have any of the girls there.
Agreed.
And that one always brings up, well, the Boy Scouts were run by pervs. I go, you're distracting us from the issue. The issue is dads and sons have to be able to go out and do dad-son thing. If you want the sons to grow up to be respectable men, you need dad there. And it can't be dad and the son and a bunch of girls confusing. You need, my wife has health problems, serious health problems. I drove my sons to every sporting event, every concert, everything. That time, that driving in the car 4 hours to some gymnastics meet or some lacrosse tournament or something was so precious because it was just me and my son talking about the philosophy of life, riding on the chairlift at the ski slope where you got nothing but your son, you got nothing but him to talk to. That's when you convey the issues that he will have to confront. And the activists want to take that away.
The WEF, that's what they want. They want to destabilize.
But it's also nitwits.
Yeah.
The WEF doesn't get you to do it, doesn't get me to do it. Now, what they might be getting us to do is to fight with them.
Yes.
So Peter Boghossian, who's sort of a friend, I don't know what to call a person who I've chatted with and communicated with and have never met. What do you call that person? I have friends on Twitter.
Acquaintance, I guess.
They're good friends, though. Rudy Havenstein is a good goddamn friend. We've been tight as rain for so many years. And so Boghossian said, the solution to an extreme left is not an extreme right.
Oh, agreed.
And,
Agreed.
and he's
100%.
correct about that. But what it is doing is pulling us that way. And I've got a terrible frontier justice streak in me. So when I see the system failing to solve a problem, I go, 1850, somebody get a rope. Because I'm going, the system's failing. We've got to deal with this. So I would love for Fauci to be taken to court, convicted. You can hear in just the outcome, the frontier justice streak in me. He's such a bad person.
I think his time's coming up. I think justice will be served. I have a lot of faith.
So here's the other funny thing I've noticed. I read and write so much now. I'm an atheist, but
yeah,
I'm not
I remember
really.
you told me that last time.
I'm not really an atheist. I used to be an atheist where I thought, I had all these images of them stepping on, famous scientists and, the church getting in the way of progress and this and that. So I had this really negative view of the church. The whole deity thing has never made sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me. But as I seasoned on the topic, I came to terms with the idea that just because I don't want to participate in religion doesn't mean that it hasn't served a profoundly positive role in society. Praise the Lord. I can hear you saying it.
Well, we all have a deep yearning for a spiritual connection, so.
But it also provides a structure.
Yes.
Provides a sense of community. You every Sunday morning, the small little town out on the prairie would go to church and talk about what it takes to be a good person and talk about what it means to be a community and things like that. And so the Judeo-Christian ethic has structured America. And I wrote about 15 or 20 pages on this. I call myself a pagan with a noisy sword who's about to talk in favor of religion. And I've spoken in favor of Islam, and I'm not a big fan of Islam. I think there's a lot of bad ideas in Islam, like Sam Harris would say, like Bill Maher would say. But I'll tell you where Islam was brilliant. And that is when Malcolm X brought it to the Black community. Because he was looking at Black community, and it's not their fault. Because when you take a community that's had their family shredded repeatedly through centuries, they don't just reassemble into stable family units that easily. They needed structure. Islam not only brought structure, but it was a decidedly non-white based structure. So it was clean as a whistle in terms of it not being the white man's religion. And so what an interesting angle. And they dress up in suits and they are organized. Malcolm X could have been unbelievably important in history, and he got snuffed early. And so I find myself agreeing with the guys who are always talking about God. And I don't talk about God, and I don't praise the Lord, and I don't do any of that. But when I listen to guys who use God in every other sentence, all those other words I identify with the rest of what they're saying more than the guys who don't use God in their sentences. This is a strange transformation of me. And what it is it's about the guy who's quoting God is likely to be the guy supporting don't bring transgenderism into kindergarten. Don't bring, boys into sports, female sports. Those are the guys. Those are the frontline warriors who are trying to push back against some very bad ideas. Those are the guys who went to January 6th, which I wrote a lot about. And I think America's darkest moment was not January 6th. It started on January 7th. When we started responding to a bunch of people, and Putin said it brilliantly. Putin said, I saw hundreds of people show up at the White House because they had political grievance. I'm going, oh, that guy's good. He's a clever bastard, the way he said that. And to throw people into solitary. And to
Mama's still in there, I think.
I know. The things, and then, and by the way, McCarthy, I don't trust him at all. I don't trust him at all. For one thing, he's done two things. One is he's not released He's not released the tapes. Where are the tapes?
You're
There's
never gonna see
41,000. And then he gave one of these symbols, which bothered the shit out of me. He gave one of those explicitly. And I go, he's a goddamn New World Order guy.
Oh, he's with him. He's a globalist. I believe he's with him. Again, this whole Republican Democrat thing, it means nothing to me, you know.
But it's not just one party.
It's a uniparty.
But it's more than that. I think it's Whitney. This idea of corrupting people at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Epstein was about, right?
Yes.
Epstein, he spins off of Meyer Lansky, Ray Cohn, all these guys. They were all about capturing people in power. But it's worse than that even, because a person in power in theory could not be captured if they were a good person, right? You don't have to bang 16-year-olds. You can make that choice not to. Now, here's the problem. I think the model that's being played out, the model that you're getting from this spirit cooking, is that you're not allowed to get power unless you're already compromised.
Well, yeah, that's what the club is. You know, you have to, you know, I'm not even going to say some of the unspeakable acts that they do to get but some of them want to get compromised. Like Hunter Biden, like the laptop.
Well, they're told to get compromised or you won't rise.
Exactly.
And so it's I'm going to go back to Yellowstone because I've been binging it. I'm not done, but they brand the guys.
Mm-hmm.
They brand them, and then you become one of us. Then you can't leave. You can't leave the Yellowstone Ranch because you're branded.
It was, I think, something to do with Harvey Weinstein. I forgot what the Nexium cult or something. Where they were branding the girls in Hollywood. Oh, it was all kind of weird.
Right.
Stuff.
So there's if people start paying attention, they will start to pick up these shards.
But like you said, it's just going to make you unhappy, mad, and miserable, hate the world, hate the government, you know.
That's the problem. and I'm kind of addicted to it at this point.
Because you can't fix it. You can't fix it.
If people know me, they can see me incrementally moving in this direction. Someone, like if one of my colleagues watched this video and they had never watched one, they'd be calling in an intervention in a heartbeat. but they haven't watched. I've written every year I write an annual survey, which I'm told I'm supposed to hype it over at Amazon, but you can get it for free. But it started as just a dozen pages describing how I did that year in the markets. And it kind of was my launching pad because I've been in a bear market chat board since the late 90s. And there were very famous people there who I didn't even know they were famous at the time. And then the .com collapse occurred, and I had exited equities. I'd bought gold. Talk about good timing. In 2000, 2001, I started buying energy. So what I think what got me on the map is I wrote. I decided in 2009. I wrote at the end of the year. For my 200 buddies on this chat board, I'd write a summary of how I did. And I started adding a little bit of color. And then in 2009, I said, look, you've been doing this invest for 30 years now. Write one seriously. And so I wrote a serious one, and it got just tens of thousands of clicks. And I go, whoa, what just happened? And then I wrote one in 2010, whatever. But from I don't know if you know markets well. I don't know where you are. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Crypto, stocks, we do it all.
Right. I did well through the 80s. I actually entered equities after the crash of 87. Mm-hmm. The crash woke me up to what equities, how they should be in my portfolio. I was all bonds until then, which was really good, by the way.
Not anymore, though, huh? Bonds are not the way to go.
No, well, it might be now. I'm not a trader, though, at all. Mm-hmm. Once every 10-year sort of decision. In 87, after late 87, I decided to start moving into equities. I was a tech bull. The people who know me go, oh, no, I can't picture this. I was not only a tech bull, I was leveraged.
Ooh, not good.
Which was a sign of the top. And then by 98, mid 98, it was early July. I had studied market structure enough to say something's wrong. I'd read enough history of markets books, and I took half my equities and dumped them in early July. We went right into the Asian crisis. And I'm thinking, you're either a half genius or half idiot. I'm not sure which. And I said, if this ever comes back, I'm getting the other half out because this is still nuts. And it came back. So mid 90s, I dumped all equities, 100%. I made 700% on WorldCom. Tell me someone else who did that. I made 700% on Dell, 400% on Warner Lambert. I had some unbelievable. I had a year where, not counting the leverage, I made over 100%. So that's not 100% based on leverage. That's 100% on assets at risk. And then I got out in 99.
Right before the dot-com bubble?
That's right. I said, look, eBay. I looked at eBay. I said, maybe eBay. I didn't own any .coms. Maybe eBay. And then I did the math. I said, if they grow earnings 20% a year for a dozen years, they're fair value. This is stupid. And so I got out. Somehow I bought a ton of gold and silver. And then to fight what I perceived to be a coming inflation, which never materialized, I started buying energy equities. I talked to Jimmy Rogers' partner to buy commodities. I didn't like what I was hearing. So it turns out my best decade relative to my competition, my best decade was by far the 90s. I mean, just massive returns. My best decade relative to competition was from January 1st of 2000 to December 31st of 2009, at which point I compounded 13% a year. Now, everyone else had been crushed, 2 bear markets, and I did 13% a year. That's what caught people's attention. So I remember when I wrote the first big one, and the emails start flowing in. And there, all of a sudden, there's an email from David Einhorn. I go, what? and so we've been friends ever since. I've had him over to dinner. We do all sorts of stuff. He was at my house a month ago, right? I've had famous people in my house now. I'm a router or something. I missed the entire next decade because when the 08, I wrote about the 08-09 crisis in 02, and I called it. I was writing to my friend at Goldman named Rick Sherlin, who ran their tech group. And he said, what's got you so jumpy? I wrote about 5 pages saying, subprime this, that. I said they're pulling risk forward. GE's using derivatives to get themselves extremely exposed, blah, blah, blah. And I nailed everything except for the JP Morgan. I thought they were going to go to zero, and they did not. Then in 08-09, they did. And I told my class in 07, they were about to. And the
bailouts come.
And I had witnesses. So my class of sophomores, and when they were seniors, I had them in a course, and it was spring of 09, right? So the world was collapsing. And it was a senior thesis course. And the first day I said, didn't I tell you this was going to happen? They go, yes, you did. And my first guest speaker was the CEO of Morgan Stanley Bank. And he told 2 hours of horror stories to the class, right? So in any event, that somehow people said, oh, this guy nailed that. And then the next decade, I missed it because 08-09 should have caused much more long-term damage. And it didn't, because the central bank shoved $30 trillion in.
Oh, now, yeah, they printed us out of it.
Right.
They kicked the can down the road.
You can't find anyone in the world who predicted that magnitude. So any other bust like that would have been more of a Nikkei-like bust, real long-term secular, and no one. So when they bailed out Bear Stearns for $30 billion, it sucked the oxygen out of the room. I remember this, like, holy, they just dumped $30 billion to bail out Bear. That's peanuts. No one saw 30 trillion coming. No one saw QE forever coming. No one saw any of this coming. And no one would have believed you could do it and somehow get away with it. Well, I don't think we're going to. Remember the movie Pearl Harbor?
Yep.
Remember when the torpedo bounces across the runway and Red sticks his head up and says, hey, guys, it's a dud. And then he gets blown off. Well, this is Red. Red is yelling, hey guys, it's a dud. And I believe that we are going to have a generational bear market that is unimaginable.
I I think you alluded to that before on our last episode we did, and it's definitely got me worried, being invested in not just, the
But
stock market,
where
but the
is it?
crypto market. Well, I think through the COVID money, they've, kicking the can down the road, and I think that it's gonna get kind of prolonged, but I do think it's gonna start getting bad probably after
Well,
the
so here's
presidential election.
here's my nightmare scenario. My nightmare scenario is that inflation really is much worse than the numbers say,
Of course it is.
clearly, and that it's going to be a horrific 15-year period in terms of real return, but they're going to be able to keep it elevated nominally, and that they're going to keep lying there about inflation. I just read an article this morning about the tight housing market. I go, no, it's not tight. It's broken, guys. It's totally broken because the sellers can't sell because they can't give up their 2% mortgage. But what's that do? That stagnates the economy. If you're supposed to move to get a new job and you can't move because you can't afford to get a new mortgage, that stagnates the economy. So they're doing the labor market is not tight. The labor market is not strong. It's tight and it's broken. The housing market is not strong. It's tight and it's broken.
Banks are collapsing in real time.
Banks are collapsing, and when I just finished a book about a month ago on the Florida real estate bust. It was a great book because it was so vividly crazy. And it turns out the four guys who were most prominent in the bust all ended up flat broke, unable to feed themselves. But what's really interesting is the banks started to fail. And the bank failures in Florida really contributed massively to the Great Depression. The failure started in 1925. And everyone kept laughing them off as, well, those are those crazy Floridians. And then they started failing in the South. Well, those are those Southern bumpkins. You're from what? South Carolina
New Orleans.
or something?
I'm in New Orleans.
New Orleans, right? And so they laughed it off. And then it just 12,000 failures later. And I remember when the banks started failing and when things started going south in 2007. And a few voices were saying this is a problem. The market ABX index was dropping. This is a problem. The real estate bubble had burst in 2006 very quietly. And then Bear Stearns hedge funds, internal hedge funds collapsed. You go, yeah, but they're only 600 million a piece. Well, not really. They looked like 600 million a piece, but they weren't. And those were all shots across the bow. I think Powell is determined to break the spine of equity speculators.
It feels that way. It feels very similar to 2008. And, I think they said they're pausing interest rate hikes now because they know exactly what you're saying, that if they continue raising them, one, it's not stopping inflation, but it's going to just decimate, the real estate market. I think that's my speculation.
So here's a funny story, and I thought about this for about 10 years. I got in an argument with David Andolfato, who was vice president of St. Louis Fed. And to his credit, he would communicate with me. And he talks about Volcker. And he says Volcker's policies initially, the hero, were deflationary. And so he was achieving what he was achieving. But eventually they became inflationary. And we went back and forth a couple of times, and it never left my skull, because here's the problem. It's 16% interest rate, which in theory shuts down the economy. At the end of that year, every money market account, every bank account has 16% more than it started. So money is getting shoved in. Now, what it's gotten me to do is really just once again convince myself I don't understand banking, because I don't really know where that 16% comes from. And those of you who want to try, listen to all the videos by John Titus and, he does a beautiful job explaining why the QE money was not inflationary and the COVID money was. It's actually quite simple. QE, they took assets and gave them good assets, but it was just reserve assets. It wasn't an increase in money. In the COVID bailout, they actually gave the banks money, which got deposited into accounts. And as a consequence, it put money into the accounts during a period when we created no wealth.
None. Yeah, none.
None. And as a consequence, that was just pure money on top of nothing. And therefore, we now have inflation.
Then
this inflation's not going
too.
away.
Yeah, through the derivative. You know,
that's right. The shadow bank. So by the way, I'm not a. I like to call them hodlers. You guys call them hodlers. Why hodlers instead of hodlers?
I think it's just a play on words. Like a lot of times, like, you know, with typos.
Where's hod come from? Where's hod come from?
Well, it's like hold, but spelled different. So it's like a meme. It becomes a meme where HODL just becomes like its own thing. It's internet. It's internet speak.
Okay,
it's Twitter
so
speak.
I call it hodlers.
Hodlers.
And I call myself a godler. I'm totally sympathetic. And let me explain to your hodler crowd why I'm a neutral. One is I do believe you guys are going to do battle with the state.
Oh, yeah.
And I do believe that you don't know who's going to win that. And I do sympathize with you guys in every imaginable way. So the godlers, the hodlers are kissing cousins. And if I didn't own gold, you go over me, but I just own gold, you own Bitcoin. I'm just going old school, you're going new school. So
BlackRock's into Bitcoin now.
That should scare you.
Oh, of course. But
right. No, but you just said it like it made it legit. No, it means that they're gonna take the world that for you is a pure world.
Yeah.
And they're gonna pool.
You don't think they're doing that to the gold market though?
No. But gold that we've been struggling with this for 5,000 years. You're about to discover what happens when the bad guys show up to the pool.
Oh, they're here. Yeah, they're here.
That's right. And what you're going to find out is they can destroy anything. And I'm rooting for it, but there's going to be a brawl before it's over. This is going to, right. Now, let me explain to all the hodlers, why I'm not a hodler. That is, I know it's easy on Bitcoin, but then you turn around, you find out FTX collapses. You find out if you don't own it, if you don't have it.
Not your keys, you learn about
VPN, not your keys, not your coin. I get all that. There are some of us who are just saying, I don't need anything else to worry about. And so you can say, well, if you got money and Fidelity, you get to worry about it. I go, but it's the devil I know. And I've spread my assets over banks across the country. I've tried. I own physical gold. I own my house is 3 times what I should own. It's an unbelievable, life-changing experience. I hang off a 100-foot cliff looking west over Cayuga Lake. It is utopia. And I accepted tying up the capital and say, I will own this house. And so that's a hard asset. And Ithaca real estate's never done anything but just at most tread water. It's unbelievably tame because of the universities and stuff like that. So David, but the point being is, I think there's a number of us who would be hodlers if we really believed that there was no way to come and hurt us. But I don't believe that is the problem. And if I put the kind of hours I need to, I think I could be converted. But as you can tell, I read about too much goddamn stuff, and so I think the hodlers tend to underestimate why prudent investors, people you think ought to be hodlers, are resisting it.
Yeah, no, look, Professor Dave, any skepticism of Bitcoin, as always, y'all, it's not financial advice. I'm not trying to tell you, I'm not trying to convince Professor Dave to buy Bitcoin.
I brought it up. I
own gold. I own real estate. You're 100% right. BlackRock's, they're here to party. They're going to want to manipulate it. They're going to want to control it. They're going to want to hurt it. But I do look at it from a sense of that, people like you that don't you kind of feel at this point you're risking more not being in it than having
Well,
some
how much?
exposure?
Well, so then I asked the question, how much exposure?
Okay, well, let's think of this. The last time we talked, and we can go look up the video dates. I think Bitcoin was around 15, 16,000 per coin when we did our last
Oh, it
video.
would have been good, well timed. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's at 30,000. So again, I just look at in an inflationary environment that that we're in, that it's maybe worth. I mean, you have real estate, that's awesome. You have gold, that's awesome. So to expose yourself a little bit to a new asset class might not be a bad idea.
Well, so here's the problem. I've never been a believer in exposing yourself to a small amount of an asset class. I put that right in the category of buying a $10,000 life insurance policy.
Okay,
It's
go on.
not going to change. It's not life changing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I decide Bitcoin is the way to go, and people say, what price would you go in at? I go, it's not about price.
Mhm.
It's going to be some moment in time where my brain is going to click.
Yeah, you're not just gonna buy $1,000 of it. You're gonna want to buy,
Wouldn't do me any good. Wouldn't
okay,
do me any
yeah.
good.
That,
For
that that
one thing,
that's
because the gold in the house and stuff will protect me at that level.
yeah.
And so for me to go meaningfully into an asset class, so I went into energy in 2020. And there were two events that got me to do it. I made a ton on energy, as I said, during the decade following 2000, a
Mhm.
ton. Um, and then I got knocked out of it. Believe it or not, it wasn't even a decision. Fidelity knocked me out of it. They saved me a lot of money.
Mhm.
They said it was too speculative. Energy equities are too speculative.
I don't
What do
understand
you?
that. I
Well, it
don't
was
think they're
absurd. They
if
they
I'm
put me in a
investing.
they put me in a life cycle fund, and I
Yeah.
said, "Holy shit!" So I don't do that, but I didn't even know it for about 2 years. Um, but I reached out to some hedge fund managers, said I got kicked out. Should I go back in now? Now, in theory, I thought I owned it. They kicked me out, and then and they and I said, but it's offered me an opportunity to ask, should I be in it now? And they said no, 6 for 6. And so I didn't go back in.
Mhm.
And the energy equities went down another factor or two. So they saved me again. So Fidelity saved me, then the six hedge fund guys saved me. And in 2020, Exxon got kicked out of the Dow, and I go, that's a buy signal. And I'm not a TNA guy or TA guy. I'm a TNA guy. Not really. I'm too old. But I don't. If you listen to markets, what percentage of the discussion is about value as opposed to technical indicators like money flow and timing and all this shit, right? Like a friend of mine who had dinner at my house, another one, very prominent guy, said, I'm not as bearish as I used to be. And then I'm going, really? And he said, yeah. He said, I think in the fall the whole thing's going to collapse. I go, his time scales are way too short. I'm not buying it to get out by fall. I'm buying it out by 2040
Mhm.
and or 2030 at least, right? But so and then Jesse Felder points out that energy had gone from in 2016, about when I got kicked out actually, from 16% of the S&P to 2%.
Mhm.
These are the companies that power the world. And they were 2% of the S&P. I go, that's another buy call.
That's a buy
So in
signal,
2020, I bought some energy equities. The problem is I'm handcuffed by the belief in the secular bear market. What I can tell you is that if you own an asset when everything goes down for 10 years, you're going down with the ship. And
I've
that's
thought about that since
and
you've told me that. You told me that.
and Felder in a direct communication said, look, Dave, don't let your macro view stop you from prevent you from missing a good idea.
Mhm.
That sort of got into my skull, and that's when I bought some. Now, the problem is they're not life-changing. They're big enough where I look and I go, decent amount of money. But for me, life-changing is it's got to be a pretty good percentage of my net worth.
Yeah, so you don't believe in being too diversified. You look at it if you have conviction in an asset to kind of go all
Uh,
in.
so I'm okay being diversified. I, I tend to average in. So if I
Me too.
decide to
Me
go into
too.
Bitcoin, it would take me 10 years to get a position.
Pomp didn't try when you went on with him. He didn't try to
Oh,
convert you.
No, Pomp is great. He's probably tried out 3 different podcasts. But I think he doesn't have me on to talk about Bitcoin. I'm not there to talk about Bitcoin, and we occasionally brush up against it and stuff. But he's smart enough to know don't get in a hodler godler battle, you know. And I'm not
Oh
going to get
yeah.
it. I'm not going to get into it because I don't think the Bitcoin guys have it wrong at all. I just
I
think they
think some of
could
them
get
are
hurt.
crazy. Some of the Bitcoin dudes are crazy, but like I look at you though, Professor Dave, like I can't disagree with what you're saying, but like I also do look at you if one day the light bulb did switch, like you would be the type of person to write a big paper on it to like really break
I'd write about
down.
it.
Yeah,
I would do
you
it.
would
Yeah.
kind of say like, hey, like, that's a real great characteristic to have to be able to change your mind on something. You know what I'm saying?
Now,
Like,
my failure
mhm.
is, and I've had long discussion with Greg Foss and these guys, right? I am the most followed non-hodler in the Bitcoin Twitter sphere. I think if I ever announced I was a hodler, the Twitter sphere would light up. There's
Do you
something
know
about the
why?
role. I don't know. Well, I kind of know why, but no.
It's because a lot of your ideology, and
It's
what you
Bitcoin,
exactly.
right?
It's like everything you're like 99% there besides the Bitcoin element, which like it
Right.
doesn't even bother me. You know what I'm saying? Because like
Which shouldn't, right?
yeah, no, these I'll watch the arguments, the Peter Schiff type people arguing,
Hey,
gold
he
versus
went
bit.
into it, but see, I don't think he went into it as a believer.
Uh-huh. Well,
So
he's got Bitcoin NFTs now, so now he's
I know.
involved in it, which
Well,
is
but that to me just strikes me as the guy who said, "Wait a minute, there's money to be made here." I have to be a so I no, I don't think Peter became a believer. I think Peter recognized just an opportunity, and that's different, right?
yeah, that
You
that's that.
you can buy Tesla thinking it's gonna someday go down, but you're gonna buy it for the run up.
And look, I sold Tesla stock. It ran up 40%. I hate electric cars. I never want to own one. But yeah, you're right. You're right. I've seen an
So
opportunity.
I first looked at Bitcoin at $10. Now
Professor Dave,
here's what would have happened.
you
It
would have
would have
sold it
gone
at
to
20.
50. It went up so fast I could have gotten to it by 20. I would have sold it at 50, and then I would have spent the proceeds in therapy.
Oh,
I have a stock I sold. The worst investing decision I ever made was one where I sold it. It got bought up. I had shares in something, got bought up by a company I knew nothing about.
hmm.
I said, well, I don't know anything about it, so I'm getting out. And it turns out it went up 100-fold. And I
Look,
don't lose sleep over that either.
I've made a lot of big purchases in my life that my inner circle has called me crazy. I've bought some investment properties. People's like, man, you're spending that. You're buying a duplex right now. And I just kind of go with my gut, Professor Dave, whether it's
No, I
Bitcoin,
know.
whatever. And I'll live with my bad decisions. I've made some bad financial decisions, 100%, but I made a lot of
Well, the
good
other
ones, I
thing
think.
you have to do, and they always say don't do this, and I completely disagree. And they say
Mhm.
don't marry an investment. I think you have to. I think you have to because if you buy Bitcoin and you don't marry it, you're not going to survive when Bitcoin goes from what is it 33,000 when it goes down to 15 again. You're not going to survive that if you don't marry it. And if it goes from 33 to 15 up to 100, if you didn't marry it, all the guys who made 100-fold on Microsoft, they have one common denominator. They didn't
Mhm.
sell. They didn't sell.
Oh, they knew.
I
Yeah.
have I happen to know the guy I sent the email to at Goldman,
Mhm.
who was at the ground floor of Microsoft going public. He was the sell side analyst with the investment bankers who were putting together Microsoft for the IPO.
Wow.
He was considered, hold on.
Yeah, he
He
good.
was considered he was considered the best software analyst. Hold on. in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's him.
Okay.
He is my roommate in college.
No way, huh?
Yeah, fraternity brother.
So he was a
And
software analyst?
he founded my Goldman Software Group. He created it.
Wait, so
And
y'all were roommates in college, like by random, or you knew him already?
well, I knew him in college, and I went off to grad school, and he went off to business school. And then next thing I know, one of my friends saying, Ricky's pretty famous, I hear. I go, oh, really? And then I see him on the cover. So we're in communication, and I was in communication. He's the one who actually helped me get out of the tech stocks.
Mm-hmm.
Not because he told me to get out, because he described shit going on in the tech stocks, and my brain said that's just not right.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. So the bottom line is that I think you have to marry an investment, because so I asked him about Microsoft. I said, was it always a lock? Was it a no-brainer and people just didn't see it? He said, absolutely not. He said that faced existential risk 3 times. He said there's no way it was a guarantee. And so you got to survive those.
But even though there was those risks, his conviction was still.
I don't know what he did with his own money.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. He made a tough call. You know how I knew the market? This was a funny story. The markets, it was 2000. And I don't know if listeners will remember this or not. It was 2000. And the markets were really near the Druckenmiller top. And he made a call on Microsoft that was tough. And when Rick makes a call, Microsoft, it's a call, right? He moves markets with his calls. And the markets went down on that call, something like 500 points, the Dow.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the headline.
Really?
And then by the end of the day, they got back to even. And I said, oh, it's game over. This is not a healthy market at all. And so I remember when Steve Case combined AOL with Time Warner, and I can't remember what year it was, but I remember thinking, oh, he's cashing in his chips. And then
it was a flop though, huh?
Not for Steve Case.
Oh yeah, not for him. Yeah. But for
the other tech stock owners tried to do the same thing. They tried to cash in their virtual wealth for real wealth. The shareholders were so greedy that they didn't want that. They go, no, we don't want to own Time Warner. We want to own AOL, and so those kind of deals, they were putting them together to try to get the virtual wealth, which is gonna go away,
mm-hmm.
and combine it with real wealth to capture some of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the shareholders and the markets just wouldn't tolerate that. And so a lot of potential mergers that could have saved people's asses, and of course hurt the guys who bought into AOL, right? The Time Warner guys got crushed.
Yeah.
So it was a crazy period in the markets. There's a phenomenon, again, I created it, but I'm sure others have thought about it. The market, to the extent that the price of the equity market reflects optimism, you reach maximum optimism at the very instant, the microsecond, for which there is no justification for that optimism. That's the peak. At the peak, you're at maximum optimism with no reason left to be optimistic. Mm-hmm. That's the same with the bottom. The very, very bottom is point of maximum pessimism, right at the instance where there's no reason for pessimism. Zero reason. It's about to go on a run. So the market has it 100% wrong at the tops and bottoms. Now, the other thing that happens, I just saw a guy post he's down 57% this year. I go, how do you be down 57% this year? Bull and bear markets will make the smart guys look like it's right before they turn.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got guys like Einhorn getting crushed, and you got guys who are supposed to be the geniuses getting crushed, that's when the idiots who are crushing them are about to get crushed. And so I don't know if you read the Price of Time by Edward
I
Chancellor.
have not. I have not.
Brilliant. It's brilliant. It's just Chancellor writes about bulls and bears like there's no tomorrow. And he says never in the history of societies have interest rates gotten below 2% without a disaster. We got to zero. We got to negative.
We in for some scary times coming up, huh, Professor Dave?
I think we're in for 20 years of pain.
Oh
Well,
man.
look at the Nikkei.
Mm-hmm.
Buffett even called this year. Buffett, Mr. I invest in America bullshit. Buffett pointed out that in 1989 or 90, the 20 biggest companies, 14 were Japanese.
Wow.
Now what do they have? Nothing. He says now in 2023, out of the 10 biggest companies in the world, something like 8 of them are American. He says that won't last either.
And with the de-dollarization happening too, it's becoming a multipolar world. The West dominance. I hate to say the end of an empire, but
the big 6 or 7, the Teslas, the Amazons, the you name it. Many of them, they're total crap too.
Agree.
These are not Standard Oil.
These
are not Ford Motor.
You mean when you say total, you mean that they're overvalued in their share price?
Well, they're way overvalued. But if Facebook went away today, would we miss anything?
The world would be better.
Right. If Google went away, we would just go to Bing or DuckDuckGo or
right. No
so they are a great source of revenue for them.
Mm-hmm.
But what do they actually bring? And again, Google, I actually have a relatively high opinion of. Amazon is not as great as people think. And I wrote about this, but I stole it from a guy at Northwestern, Robert Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is not a pioneering company. Amazon is just a very large modern version of the Sears Roebuck catalog.
Pretty much. Plus, with the government subsidies they get, they've created a robust ecosystem, but yeah, they didn't really do anything.
Well, but the Sears Roebuck catalog took people from buying stuff out of country stores to being able to order 10,000 different things. And it would show up a couple weeks later. And it wasn't global, but it was transformational. That's just Amazon, right? Now, they talk about, I read a story. I know I'm ranting incoherently at this point. I read a story the other day about super stocks, and I went right by it because I go, I don't need to hear about super. They're saying, these 10 stocks for the entire return of the S&P 500, right? How many of those times we read that? And I went right by it, and then I said, wait a minute. There's a very important message there that I missed. And I'd forgotten where I read the article. So I went on Twitter, said, tell me about super stocks. Where's that article? And it turns out I could have just Googled. I could have found them. The untold story of the 10 stocks being your entire return is that there's 490 stocks who are not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you bought a gas station down the street and 5 years later, you hadn't made a penny, how'd you do?
Not good.
Not well, right? Not good. So there's 490 stocks that are not paying their owners for owning them. Now, if you own a financial concern, if you own a gas station or a grocery store or something, if you don't have cash flow and real return at the end, if you can't say, look, I'm making 12% on this investment. I own rental units. At the end of the year, I've got this much in the bank because I'm renting them. If you don't have a profit, you made a very, very bad call. So then the question is, how do you end up in a system where 490 of the biggest companies in the world aren't earning the owners any money? Now, the answer is, I think, that it's the Cantillon effect. And that is that they talk about how inflation, the guys who get the money first get rich, and the guys that get it at the end just get shitty dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of a Cantillon effect within the corporate America, where at one point the guys who own the companies, the stock, RCA sold for I think like $150 or something in 1929. That's not 10 shares for $10 a piece. That's a certificate that says you own a shitload of company. That's a lot of money, $100 a piece. Rich, powerful people own the shares. They demanded a return. They demanded that the company be a viable company. Somewhere in the 70s, the pension fund said, oh, let's make them defined contribution plans. Get it off our plates. We democratized the market. We went from rich white guys, let's call it that, rich white guys owning the world, to gazillions of no names owning the world. Now that it's gazillions of no names, the companies have no need whatsoever to return money to shareholders because they have no spokesperson.
Yeah.
They have no one to answer to. They're just index funds. How do you know why your S&P is not tracking right or whatever? So we benefited from, here's a number for you. This will blow your circuits. My elevator pitch for the sad state of affairs going forward is the following. In 1981, valuations were at a profound low.
Mm-hmm.
Century-long low. The Russians, the Soviets were collapsing, and they started selling resources for pennies. The Chinese were coming out of the dark ages. They started selling labor for pennies. The boomers were entering the workforce in earnest. They were starting to hit stride. They brought their wives with them. Demographics is everything. They made us crank. And on top of that, interest rates were about to go from near 20% to zero, which Buffett said in his 99 article, that is the whole story. When rates are dropping, equities are going up. When rates are rising, equities are going down. When some moron tells you low rates is bullish, they are dead wrong. Dropping rates is bullish, not low rates. Once they're low, you've squeezed every drop of gain from interest rates dropping out of the system. You squeeze the lemon to the very end. Now they're going to go up, and you're going to get hurt. That's what we're experiencing.
And that's what we just experienced. Yeah.
So we just experienced 40 years of recency bias. During that 40 years, now hang on to your hat, market valuations, now not market price, not the value of the market, not the price of the valuation, the price divided by GDP, divided by earnings, divided by revenue, divided by book, divided by one of 25 different things. A metric which should just move around but never change. It's the most mean regressing metric of any. Valuations will always slop around some mean. The market valuations using 25 metrics have grown 3.5% annualized for 40 years. Now, here's the question. What happens if the next 40 years they drop 3.5% annualized? Looking for the next low. We just did a 7% swing from tailwind to headwind.
Yeah.
There's no way you can win that.
There's no way.
You can't grow your way past that. There's no way to win.
Because they interjected all the fake money that they could into the system to, I guess, essentially prop it up.
And the Nikkei is a micro example of that. If you own the Nikkei in 1990, you're still underwater. What is it, 35 years later? 33 years later. I asked someone on a QTR podcast, I said, if there's someone out there who can do this, do it for me. What would happen if you started averaging the Nikkei from the top? Not own it, but started buying on the way down, average on the way down. How long would it take to break even? And some guy did the spreadsheet for me and sent it to me. It would take 22 years to break even. 22 years of averaging down before you were even. Therefore, the Nikkei, think of it as a micro version of what could be the global equity markets, were uninvestable.
Wow.
I think we're heading for a period that could be there's going to be people make money. There will be people make money. But
of course. Just not us.
Well, no, but the global MSCI, it's also overvalued.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't even know how. You ever see the write-up by Horizon Kinetics where they analyze how the valuations of the triple Qs are measured?
I did not.
I think it's either the triple Qs or the NASDAQ. I'm not sure which, but they're the same. Right?
Uh-huh.
They are the same. There's a PE and the PE is listed something like 30.
Yeah.
But it turns out that, as described, they any company with a PE above 40, it gets rounded down to 40. Any company without a PE, it gets assigned 40.
Real. I didn't know that.
They estimated that the actual PE, I think it was the triple Q, was in the mid 90s. So you're buying the triple Qs thinking you're buying a company, you're buying a conglomerate that's right now returning ballpark 5%. And if you get growth, maybe more, when in fact you're buying one that's earning 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Now, John, goddamn it, what's his name? Famous journalist, John, he did the same analysis on another index and came to the same conclusion. What's his name?
Oh, the deeper I get in, the stock market, the way these valuations are derived, it's like kind of scary. You know what I'm saying?
But the other question is do you think the wealthy and the powerful are going to let the money trickle down and make you rich?
Oh, no. Yeah, they're going to. I mean, that's what the 87,000 IRS agents are for, just in case that does happen. Yeah.
And there's a famous economist at Berkeley, I can't remember his name. I want to say Thaler, but I'm thinking I'm mixing him up with another one, who wrote an article in 95 about how the banks make money on the way up and the way down.
Yeah, they would love another Great Depression. They would love it. They love
They make money
fees.
going both directions.
Yeah,
they make money on the bailouts on the way down and on selling shit on the way up. And
of course.
The bottom line is they're not going to let the little guy get the money.
No. Money is influence. They can't have a bunch of.
That's the Cantillon effect on investing. By the time it gets to you, there's none left.
Or it's so kind of like with Social Security, where you might get your Social Security check, but through inflation, that 385, 400, whatever it is, ain't gonna be worth nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
But look, Professor Dave, we're at the 2-hour mark. That was absolutely incredible. Professor Dave, I'm calling. I'm going to do everything I can because we need to see Professor Dave on Joe Rogan. I think that would be probably one of the funniest, best interviews Joe Rogan's ever had. But Professor Dave, could you please tell my audience where they can find you on Twitter, any other platforms?
Well, they can find me on Twitter, David B. Collum. They can find me occasionally showing up on Zero Hedge. I went to search Zero Hedge and I was on there something like 70 times. So,
oh, wow.
Usually as the topic of the conversation more than the conversation. And then I have a year in review that I've been writing since 2009. And because of websites, it's been fragmented to bits. I consolidated them all on my department website. You can also buy. This is totally shilling now. You buy the 2022 one at Amazon, and you can buy the 2009 to 2012 one at Amazon. Because It turns out a friend named Bob Moriarty, the gold bug, took them and prepped them and said, let's upload them to Amazon. And I put it this way, I'm not getting rich, but I think his target is to get all of them up there as like an anthology. And it's probably 2,000 pages. I mean, it's probably that much.
I'm definitely gonna buy. I didn't know it was on Amazon. I'm definitely gonna buy one.
If you search my name on Amazon, I can guarantee you, it's it's the best beer money, and I don't drink
Okay.
much. But it's entertaining that it's there,
Yeah,
and
no, that's awesome. So y'all definitely go on Amazon, buy that, give
think
Dave a
of it as a
follow.
Patreon. Think of it as a Patreon contribution, right?
Yeah.
Because you can get it online. Send me an email. I'll send you the link to where they actually I reloaded them all to a website.
I
But
will
he says
put the
someone
link.
wants to.
I will put the Amazon link in the description of this video, also with Dave's Twitter and socials. So y'all give him a follow because we need to see Professor Dave on Joe Rogan. That's gonna be my
So
big wish.
I thought I was connected with Rogan because we have a double follow on Twitter,
Mhm.
but then he doesn't. He's off Twitter until Peter Hotez shows up, and then he goes back on Twitter. So I've had some exchanges with him. So I've
Okay.
been I've been brushing, but there's a guy who's got my resume. I would kill to get on Rogan. Then I could stop doing all this shit and just bask in the glow.
The Rogan effect, huh? You'll
But
sell.
he'll give me shit about being out of shape and shit. He'll Hotez me, say,
He'll
you're so
bully
out
you.
of shape, and I'll have to find some comeback that I don't know. Hotez, I watched him
Cyberbullying.
try to wiggle off it, and Hotez kept lying, and Rogan kept. But of course, Hotez was pushing a vaccine for health reasons, and Rogan wasn't buying it. So I think there was that.
Oh, I hope. I know he's not going to go back on there, but that would be awesome. But anyway, y'all, I'm Kevin Estopanol. This is Professor Dave Collum. Thank you so much if you made it this far in the video. And guys, I hope we didn't disturb any of you. I hope that you're not scared
I'm
because
hoping we disturbed you. I'm hoping we disturbed you.
nah, guys, I have faith in, knowledge is power, and I'd rather know about all this darkness because we are the people that's going to bring the change to the world. So I don't know how it's going to get better. I just have faith it's going to get better. Anyway, guys, we're out. Peace.